This is Destination Unlocked with me, Daniel Edward.
Just about ready to depart.
Please make sure your seatbelt is not fastened and do make yourself comfortable.
Hi, welcome back to Destination Unlocked, the conversational travel podcast where each week I'm joined by a local guide or a true travel expert to unlock a part of the world that they know inside out. Today we're going to Alaska. This is a state which I've only seen from the waterfront. I happen to have seen it quite a bit from the waterfront because I used to be a cruise director, so that's the part of Alaska that I've seen the most. But people kept telling me about this inland, the interior, and Denali. And so today I'm delighted to be joined by Derek Mooneyham, who is one of the rail guides who takes guests from cruise ships and takes them into Alaska proper. And I'll tell you, if you've done a cruise to Alaska or you're thinking of going back, or maybe you're eyeing up your very first cruise to Alaska, then after this conversation, you may well want to pin a train journey to the beginning or end of it. Enjoy. So, Derek, what are you unlocking for us today?
Well, Daniel, today I'm unlocking a big portion of Alaska. We know Alaska is really big and there's different ways to see it. And I'm going to tell you all about different parts of Alaska today.
Alaska is a huge state. I saw a map today which shows the lower 48, the continental contiguous United States, overlaid onto Alaska. And Alaska stretches over a landmass that is taller and wider than the rest of them combined.
Yes, it is. You can fit Texas inside Alaska 2.5 times. Another comparison is putting California, Montana, and Texas all into Alaska at one point. And there's so many different parts to Alaska. You know, the extreme northern regions, the beautiful coastal forest down along the southeast peninsula. There's just so many pieces of Alaska that you can see.
You're a rail guide in Alaska. And so a lot of what we'll talk about today, we're going to stick to the tracks, we're going to follow the routes, and we're going to visit the places that you go to. But it seems odd to talk about Alaska without talking about one place in particular where there is no rail at all. It's just so unusual that it also happens to be the capital.
Yes, Juneau. The only way you can get to Juneau is by ship or by plane. It's very isolated, being the state capital. Sometimes people think that Juneau's a different spot to have the state capital because it's so far away from the centers of population of Alaska, sort of isolated. And maybe the legislatures are a little isolated there too. But there's a story about having Juneau be moved up to Willow, Alaska, and be the state capital up there. That failed in 1978 when all the voters voted about it. So it's still there in Juneau. And one little interesting tidbit about Juneau is that it's one of 12 state capitals of the United States that the Capitol building does not have a dome on top of it.
It's actually not the world's most attractive Capitol building.
That is true. It does sit up on a nice hill at the top of one of the main streets there in Juneau. It sort of resembles just another government office building.
Would you recommend, if somebody's not been to Alaska, let's take cruise away from it for a moment, because I think a lot of people do think Alaska, they should go on a cruise, and we're definitely going to talk about that. But let's start with, they just want to visit Alaska by land. Given that the only way to get to Juneau is by ship or plane, would you recommend going to Juneau, or is it more common if you want to spend time in Alaska to maybe fly to Anchorage?
There are some fun excursions to do there. There is a very accessible glacier there, the Mendenhall Glacier, and you can visit that visitor center and do a lot of hiking around Mendenhall Glacier. The town of Juneau is it's a pretty small area, the main part of downtown, easy to walk around and things like that. And they also have a tramway that goes up above Juneau. It's about 1,800 feet up above Juneau, offers spectacular views. It's a good day trip if you want to maybe fly in and fly out of Juneau and continue on your way to somewhere else in Alaska.
Talking of flying in and flying out, you could ask so many local Alaskans to give you a lift, because Alaska is the state with the highest number of pilots.
That is correct, Daniel. They say 1 in 56 people in Alaska have their private pilot's license, or maybe just fly planes. You know, who knows if they're actually certified or not. There's not a lot of main highways in Alaska, so that is an excellent way for people to get around, and they can land those planes with those nice tundra tires, low pressure tires on those aircraft on sand and gravel and a creek bed, anything like that, where they can put down that airplane.
It's amazing. The fact that maybe some people, they're very competent at flying, but they might not have a license, that leans into that wild side of Alaska. They call Alaska the last frontier. It has that wild feel about it. The southeast of Alaska feels to me quite different from the main bulk of Alaska, which is north of Skagway and then Whittier, Anchorage. Which would you lean towards for a 1 week trip?
My very first Alaska experience was a cruise out of Seattle and went to those southeast ports like Ketchikan and Icy Strait Point and Juneau. I will tell you this, the scenery down in the southeast portion, it blew me away on that 7-day cruise. Just seeing the mountains and the glaciers, it just seemed to go on forever the way most of Alaska does when you try to describe it. But just seeing that from the ship, that small portion down there, made me want to see more of Alaska because it was just a small part of Alaska, but then again, it just looked so big and endless. So I love the southeast part and cruising through there, all the islands, the way your ship's captain takes you all through that journey. But being up here in the main part of Alaska, going on my 3rd year, I'm kind of falling more in love with that part of Alaska currently. Although, don't get me wrong, I would cruise down there through that section of Southeast Peninsula anytime.
I think a lot of people are now combining the two. This is something which has become very, very popular in Alaska. It's this land-sea tour combination because the cruise market does largely focus in that southeast corner. And then, of course, you've got this huge mass of Alaska, which is landlocked by itself. It's got incredible mountains, it's got wilderness, and you can't reach that part by ship.
That's correct. With the cruise ships that go up to the main part of Alaska, primarily starting from Vancouver and making their way maybe with a stop in Ketchikan, Juneau, and up toward Glacier Bay, ending up in Whittier, Alaska. Even that port is so beautiful there in Whittier. It's surrounded on each side with high mountains and glaciers and a 2.5-mile long tunnel that you have to go through in order to access the rest of Alaska. And a lot of time I tell guests on board the train that they're going about 340 miles up to Denali National Park. And I show them on the map, and it's still just a very small line when you compare it to the rest of Alaska. And it really opens up their mind on how big and how vast Alaska is.
Well, I was looking up a map of the Alaska Railroad, and it is tiny compared to the state. And yet it is also a monumental railroad.
It is going all the way from Seward up to Fairbanks, pretty much one single line of rail. And you think about it, well, you got trains going north and you got trains going south. So there are sidings where trains pull over and give way to other trains. But the Alaska Railroad primarily was started around 1914 when they did the survey between Anchorage and Fairbanks. A lot of the portion down towards Seward was already complete. Survey crews did an amazing job putting down those rails between Anchorage and Fairbanks, and primarily along waterways, which really makes for a spectacular view between Anchorage and, say, Denali National Park, one of the land portion journeys, about 233 miles. And most of the time, you're alongside a waterway, 3 or 4 different major rivers along the way. The journey from Anchorage going south to Whittier, where the majority of the cruise ships come into, that's one of the most spectacular rail trips you'll ever take, in my opinion, along a body of water called Turnagain Arm.
So why is that?
Number one, Turnagain Arm is a large body of water that used to be a fjord. Thousands of years ago, it was a fjord, just like captains take their guests into fjords in southeast Alaska and sit there and spin the ship 360 degrees to give everybody a spectacular view. But over thousands of years, Turnagain Arm has filled up with a lot of glacial silt. All the rocks and gravel from that giant ice field that used to be there came down into Turnagain Arm, and it has since filled it and made it more shallow. So you can't really bring a ship or any small boat, for the most part, into Turnagain Arm. because the high tide and low tide is very drastic and there's a lot of sediment. So it's semi-shallow and ships just don't come in there. But the views on each side with the mountains and the snow-covered peaks and the glaciers and the highway and the train tracks are basically right alongside the shoreline. It's 2 hours of just oohing and awing for the guests on board train and lots of turnouts if you're driving so you can take in the beauty as well.
So that's about a 2 hour journey. If you're going all the way up to Denali, how long would that take you?
That would be another 8 hours from Anchorage. So if you get off the ship in Whittier, it is a 10.5 hour journey all the way up to Denali National Park. Some guests, it kind of surprises them. I'll say that. Maybe they didn't look at their itinerary fully and they look at me with these big eyes. I'm like, 10.5 hours. Wow. I'm like, don't you worry. I've got you these 10.5 hours. We're going to keep you fed. You're going to have some beverages. We're going to tell stories and do all sorts of things.
So what do you do? You mentioned obviously food and stuff, but is it very structured in terms of there are meal times? You go downstairs, you then have a served lunch, then you go back upstairs into that beautiful dome and you watch the view? Or is there a program of events? Is it optional stuff or is everybody doing the same thing at the same time?
Great question, Daniel. The Holland America Princess Cruise Line railcars, they're 2 stories. They're domed glass, the entire top floor. You can see 360 degrees out there, nothing obstructing your views, except maybe the rail car in front of us, and that's about it. Upstairs, it's all very comfortable seating, 2 seats on each side. You have a bartender in every car. You have a rail guide like myself in the car. Downstairs, there is a full dining room, usually seats about 28 people at a time, with a full kitchen and open air platforms on every car. You can go outside, get fresh air as you go down the rails of Alaska. You mentioned, is it structured? The tour that I give, I've learned the information, and then our team at Holland America and Princess Rail let us cater it to how we want to communicate Alaska to people. So I take information that I studied and I disperse it to the guests and tell them different things along the way. My tour is never the same each time. And I'll do a lot of interaction with the guests. I'll read poems that I wrote. Sometimes I'll play a few Alaska songs over the speaker. And I use props as well when we go through certain sections of Alaska. For example, we go through a little section called Honolulu, Alaska. So I'll put on a nice Hawaiian shirt, a lei, and some sunglasses, and I'll compare the outside to Honolulu, and I'll tell the story why they call it Honolulu. Then on every train run, we do this thing. It's called the meet. And so a train going south from Denali to the cruise ships will meet up with the train going north from the cruise ships to Denali, and we'll stop alongside each other on the tracks, one pulled off to the siding, and we do a little exchange of information or sometimes personnel from one side of the track to the other before we continue on our journey. And I'll give everybody in my car pre-made window signs that they can put up in the window to sort of entertain or taunt the other passengers on the other car. People go crazy. They're going crazy in my car, and in the opposite train, they're laughing at us, like signs that say like our seats are heated, or no toilet paper at the lodge, or the cruise ship is out of beer, things like that. And then I'll put on some music and do a little dance party. And the other car is looking at us like, what are they doing over there? It's a lot of fun. I give them a lot of information and I keep them entertained throughout the day, as well as fed downstairs. And my bartender, they take care of them as well.
It does sound like a good fun day. So they get off the ship in the morning. They've arrived by ship. Either, in your case, they've arrived by Holland America or a Princess cruise ship. They get off the ship. They're directly transferred to the train.
Correct. They walk right off the ship, cross a small road with crossing guards and everything, and they get right onto the train right there. And then reverse, going back, they come down on the train, walk right across the street. They're right onto the ship. And I'll tell you, Holland America and Princess Logistics do an incredible job up here in Alaska. Their bags are coming down on separate vehicles to the ship from Denali. We are bringing on people in a little town called Wasilla on our way, about 3 hours outside of the ship. And they'll come on and they'll check everybody in for the cruise and scan passports, things like that, and take care of any information that they need to. And then that way they walk through security, walk onto the ship, and get their room keys at their stateroom doors.
Nice and easy. Would you recommend doing cruise, then train and stay in Denali, or the other way around?
I always enjoy taking people from Denali down to the cruise ship. So I would recommend flying into Fairbanks first, or you can do it from Anchorage as well. You go from one of those two cities to Denali National Park, spend a couple days there at either the Princess Lodge or the Holland America Lodge there at Denali. And then you get on the train with me and you take a 10.5 hour journey down to the cruise ship. And I'll tell you, the people that are getting on the train that are heading toward their cruise, it's just a different vibe because people getting off the ship in the morning and getting onto the train, they're tired, they've been packing, it's a little early. But people getting on the train at Denali going to the cruise ship, they are super excited to get onto that cruise and see more of Alaska, even after they were blown away by what they see at Denali National Park.
In a minute, I'd like to go into some of the destinations a little bit closer and deeper just to understand what we should be looking out for when we get there. But before we leave the cruise side of things, you're working with both Holland America and Princess Cruises, and you mentioned that they both have a lodge but separate. And so I wonder if there's sort of a summary of the differences for somebody who's keen to do one of these land and sea tours, doesn't know how to choose between the two options there. What would you say makes one for one person and the other for a different person?
Both lodges up there at Denali National Park are located right on the shores of the Nenana River. So both lodges have a beautiful view and they're actually located right next to one another. So you can walk from one lodge over to the other lodge. The Princess side has a little bit more shopping and restaurant offering. There are some great restaurants and things to do at the Holland property as well. But I think the Princess side is maybe just a little bit bigger. Not too much though. For example, at the Princess Lodge, there's this place called King Salmon. It's one of the main dinner areas there. And the decorations inside, the way they decorated the whole thing, it's just there's no doubt that you feel like you're in Alaska when you're inside this restaurant. They just did an amazing job at the way they decorated the King Salmon restaurant up there. You can walk back and forth to either property. If there's something over at the other property, some shopping or something you want to do, you go over there. If you want to get some ice cream back over here on this side, go over here. There's really no limit. And the people up there run those places are great. A lot of them are seasonal workers and they come up there to take care of people all summer. And that's what they do. And it's a great start to your Alaska tour to do the land portion and then head down toward the cruise.
Do you notice a difference in the guests themselves who have chosen to do Princess or Holland America?
Yes, I do. I see the Holland America guests being a little bit older. I think more families opt for Princess cruises. Different cruises offer different things, offerings for children, things like that. So, yeah, I see a difference in the ages of my guests. I'm not trying to blow it out of proportion or anything, but just a little bit younger crowd on Princess and a little bit older, laid back crowd on Holland America.
I want to get into the destinations themselves. Let's start with Denali National Park itself. You're in the lodge there. Obviously, you've got to get out and explore. It's one of the official national parks. So what would you do there? Can you roam free or you go with a ranger?
At both lodges, they offer some great tours into the park. The National Park Service will come right down to the lodge in these, I call them modified school buses. The seats are super comfortable, they're heated, it's covered, so you're not going to get wet or cold or anything like that. And they'll take you into the park. Currently, I think you can go about 47 miles into the park because there's a bridge out up there that's not going to be finished, I believe, until 2027. But the Tundra Wilderness Tour offered by the national parks, it's about 5.5 to 6 hours. And the guides that do these buses, they are really good. They know Denali National Park like it's their second home. And they are excellent at spotting wildlife. Because when people come up to Alaska, they want to see two things. They want to see wildlife and they want to see glaciers. And the guides are so good on these tours of finding wildlife. And then if the wildlife's kind of far away, you're sitting there in your chair in the bus, and then from out of the overhead, a small screen will pop down, and the driver will pick up a fancy camera and he'll zoom into what he's seen up on the ridge or up in a snowfield or something. and then you're seeing it on your screen right in front of you. And they're narrating for you the entire time. It's a great tour. I will say this, a lot of times the tours will start at 5 or 5:30 in the morning. People get their itineraries on the train going up and they open it up and it's like, well, we pull into Denali at 6 and your tour starts at 5:30 in the morning. And you need to be down there 15 minutes ahead of time. And maybe a little earlier if you're going to get in line for coffee. So it could be an early morning on those tundra tours. But then again, the animals are moving around early in the morning and it's a better opportunity to see wildlife. And it is not far away. A lot of it's crossing the road in front of us. Bears, moose, caribou, dull sheep, foxes, sometimes an occasional wolf, all sorts of wildlife up there. And those guides on that tundra wilderness tour do an excellent job of finding wildlife for the guests.
It sounds amazing. And it does sound like a good one for your camera.
Yes, definitely.
Going to be taking amazing pictures. So that's the Denali National Park. It's big on nature. It's big on wildlife. And then you're going to go down into civilization. It's where people live. Am I right in saying that Anchorage is the most populated city in Alaska?
Yes, you are. It's about 300,000 people. And there are some fun things to do around Anchorage. Yes, it is a big city. And parts of it look like a big city. You know, it has some industry side. But even if you're in the industry side of Anchorage, the views are still spectacular. It sits right against the Chugach mountain range, right on the coast of the Cook Inlet. And on semi-clear days, you can look across the Cook Inlet and see the Tordrillo Range across there, all snow-covered, and even get a look of Mount Spur, one of the closest volcanoes to Anchorage, about 70 miles away. And still a little rumblings of Mount Spur in the last year and a half or so. There's 54 active volcanoes in Alaska. People don't realize that. 54 active volcanoes stretching from the Aleutians all the way back along that border of the Ring of Fire back toward Anchorage.
That's more active than Hawaii.
Yes. I actually visited the USGS Volcanic Observatory Center in Anchorage. They had an open house and just all the monitoring that they do there, displays and real-time monitoring and real-time webcams of the volcanoes. They're watching that stuff day and night up there.
What about culture? What sort of museums and galleries and stuff would you suggest in Anchorage?
The Anchorage Museum right downtown, pretty close to a lot of the hotels that cruise guests might stay at after they fly into Anchorage or come down from Denali on the train, offers a great exhibit upstairs of the history of Alaska, a lot of gold mining and the building of the railroad. And even way before that, the original culture around Anchorage and a little bit north of Anchorage, a large culture called the Athabascans. And they were a lot of the original inhabitants there in the Anchorage area. And then also Anchorage throughout the summer, May through August, and sometimes part of September, there is something going on downtown, or concerts or street festivals or 4th of July parades and air shows at the Air Force Base nearby. There's always something happening up here. And even when I'm not in Alaska in the wintertime, October through May, I keep tabs on what's going on up here. And there's always something. You know, it's a major city. People like to have fun. When the tourists leave for the season, the residents up here are still having a great time and experiencing Alaska.
They get it back from the tourists. It's home again.
Yes, they do.
You mentioned the gold rush. That brings me on to another place which I found very interesting in Alaska, and it also connects in with trains, though a different train, and that's Skagway, which is on a fair number of cruise itineraries as well. It is further south, but it goes through the Yukon Valley as well, the White Pass Railroad.
Yes, it's sort of ironic you bring that up because I see guests that have been on their cruise and a lot of them will be wearing the White Pass Railroad hats. So they had been on the railroad there with their stop in Skagway. And it's a little different than our train. That's narrow gauge rail there in Skagway. And we're standard, so we're, a little bit bigger. I have not been to the port of Skagway, but I've seen lots of videos of the White Pass Railroad, and it goes through some spectacular scenery, just like our Alaska Railroad from Seward to Fairbanks.
I've got a friend who's there at the moment and went on that railroad yesterday, and the pictures are just stunning. It really looks amazing. Back to areas that your train runs through. Tell me about Talkeetna, because I've heard the name, but I don't know anything about it.
Yes, Talkeetna is a unique little town up there. Pretty much, it has one main street, but then three or four cross sections throughout the town, and it sits right on the banks of the Susitna and the Chulitna River, and another little river called Wiggle Creek. And if you take Talkeetna and you translate it in the Athabascan language, it actually means three rivers. So three rivers coming together up there. And it's also a stop that we do on a number of our trains for princess guests. There is a lodge up there in Talkeetna, about a 45-minute motor coach ride from the depot. And as part of their tour, they can make a stop in Talkeetna and stay there at the lodge and tour around there. Now, you've made it this far up to Alaska. I'm going to tell you something you should do. I know it may be a little pricey, maybe not in your budget, but fit it into your budget somehow because you're already up here. And it is a flight around Denali. And then you land on a glacier at the base of Denali. You can do that right out of Talkeetna with a firm called K2 Aviation. I did that last year and it was sunny up there. I was wearing basically just a pullover shirt and jeans. The expert pilot takes you all the way up to Denali, which is still 47 miles away from Talkeetna at that point. So you have to fly past all of these 30-mile long glaciers and past these giant peaks. It's hard for me to describe, and I tell this to people on the train. I really can't describe it. You just have to do it. Denali is so big by itself at 20,310 feet, but everything in front of it is massive too. And when you fly straight toward Denali, you have to go over that stuff and through and around things. You're just glued to the window the entire time. And you get out of the plane and you walk on the glacier and you're taking selfies with Denali in the background and things like that. And that is one of the most spectacular things you can do up there in Talkeetna. There are lots of fun things to do downtown as well. Go to the National Park office, learn about all the climbers on Denali, have a cold beer in a beer garden or a few of the restaurants. There's a special place to go get some spinach bread up there that's famous. Talkeetna is a great little spot up there.
And you mentioned that it gets its name from the Athabascan. So let's talk about native Alaskans. While right now we are in a position where Alaska's native tribes are celebrated and their culture has been brought out and is right there for people to see, that has certainly not been the case for a fair amount of time in American involvement in Alaska. It's in living history that has started to change.
I don't know the exact number of the different regions, such as Athabascan, but it's under 10. So it's spread out across Alaska. And there are spots, a few little towns outside of Anchorage, where you become more aware of the native culture up there and the history. Like we talked about earlier at the Alaska Museum, they have a lot of information there. And it really is very well done with a lot of videos and a lot of authentic items. The clothes that they used to wear a long time ago when they were living in very harsh conditions with not a lot of shelter before Alaska became more populated throughout the 1800s after Captain Cook came up in 1778. They really had to adapt to the harsh conditions up here year round. A lot was learned from them when people came up north, whether they're looking for gold or doing trading along the coast. The native population of Alaska is very important in the history of Alaska.
Another group of people that surprises people who have not visited Alaska or not spent some time learning about the history, people are surprised to know that before it was an American state, it was Russian.
Yeah, that's true. Russia had a lot of trading, trapping animals over here and fur trading. At one point, Alaska was considered sort of a money-making industry, the fur trading industry, to make money here in Alaska and send it back to the motherland, if you want to call it there, say Moscow. But eventually, they didn't profit very well from that industry. And that's where they got to the point where they're like, hey, maybe we'll sell it to the United States on pennies on the dollar. And they did. And what a bargain the United States got at that point, especially once you consider all the natural resources that we gained here in Alaska. They called it Seward's Follies when we bought it. I think he was the Secretary of the Interior at the time. It wasn't a very popular thing in the Congress of the United States at the time when we did, but looking back, it was a good deal for the US.
It was a fortuitous decision.
Yes, sir.
One thing that I can't separate from Alaska, and I know you've mentioned the wildlife, I also can't help but think about the food, and some of that wildlife that you will see out and about alive is also the wildlife that people most look forward to sampling on their plate. Not all of it, of course, but the salmon and the crab in particular really stands out to me as dishes that you can't separate from Alaska.
Yeah, I agree, Daniel. I consider myself sort of a salmon snob. Okay, growing up, my granddad would fish for salmon out beyond the Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco and bring it back, throw it on a charcoal grill and cook it right there that same day. So I love salmon. And being up here in Alaska, you do get the opportunity to get some super fresh salmon. I mean, the king salmon and the sockeye, for example, in the Kenai River out on the Kenai Peninsula, great spot for salmon fishermen when they're salmon are running up the river. You basically just throw your line in and pull it out. You know, we've all seen the bears up at Lake Clark National Park sitting in the waterfalls and just grabbing a fish when it goes by. It's almost that easy for the fishermen at certain times in certain rivers here in Alaska. And you could be in Anchorage and be alongside Ship Creek. And when the tide comes in the Cook Inlet and the salmon are running up Ship Creek, we'll go over this bridge on the train and there'll be 100 people on the line standing on the shoreline or maybe with some waders on and catching salmon as they go by right there in downtown Anchorage. You know, so you can see that sort of activity even in an urban setting like Anchorage. And also, I have to mention halibut here is amazing. Halibut fish and chips, really good. And that's done in Homer, the halibut fishing capital of the world, about a 5-hour drive from Anchorage. Fantastic place to visit if you have a full day to go out there, or maybe even stay the night at one of the lodges that they have out there. Homer is a beautiful spot to visit just outside of Anchorage. You can get there by plane or car. Like I said, it's 5 hours each way, but it's 5 hours of spectacular scenery too.
This is the thing with Alaska. The journey is the destination. It's not just about where you're going to stop. You do want to see everything on the way.
Yeah, I did a journey from Alaska back to Colorado driving last summer, and it was a moving postcard the entire way. And I wish I would have stopped at more spots. It would have taken me 2 weeks instead of 1 week to do it. But you're just in awe of the beauty and the massive expanses here that it just keeps going on and on.
The wrap-up, roundup, quick-fire finish is now ready for boarding.
In your opinion, what is the top thing to see or do in Alaska?
Wow. I talked about it earlier. I'm going to have to say the flight around Denali out of Talkeetna, because you're not just seeing Denali, you're flying for 50 miles over the beautiful Susitna and Chalitna River valleys that drain down into the Cook Inlet. So you have to go over all those beautiful braided rivers and you see all the lakes. You know, Alaska has 3 million lakes. So once you get up in the air, you can see some of those 3 million lakes. Lakes, they consider it over 5 acres. You fly over so much beautiful scenery on your journey up around Denali. That's my number one thing. Go on this tour. You're up here, go on it.
So what would you say is a tourist trap or a common tourist mistake to avoid?
When you're planning your cruise to Alaska, ship itineraries can change. I understand that due to weather conditions or something that the captain deems unsafe. But look at the time that you're going to spend in port. Say you want to go to Juneau and you've heard about this and you want to do this tour and you want to do this tour, but then you look at your itinerary and you may only be there for 5 hours, depending on how many ships are in port that day or port availability, things like that. Look at those times on your original itinerary when you're booking your cruise of how long your ship is going to be in each port.
That is an excellent tip, because I have often been on a cruise where we've arrived into Juneau at 1 p.m.
I may have done that myself and been surprised about that. It's like, get in at 1 p.m. and we're leaving at 6. What?
What's your favorite time of year to visit Alaska?
I get to see Alaska in the spring and summer and fall, and it all happens so quick. Springtime along the rails, all the trees are waking up, and you can see them waking up as you're going north. You're getting higher in elevation, so you see a transition all the way up. It's super amazing to see the different at the coastal region, different at the elevation of 2,000 feet. The leaves start changing in about the second week of August up here. Long days, but it's a very short season. And then the hillsides just start lighting up with color in about the second week of August up here, all the way through about the first week of September. And it's just beautiful along the 300-mile route. The weather is what it is here in Alaska. It changes all the time. It doesn't get too cool in Alaska, but it will get cloudy and rainy, and that makes it feel colder because you're closer to the ocean and a little bit higher humidity. But 50 degrees up here in Alaska is picnic weather in the summertime. 50 Fahrenheit.
That's shorts and t-shirt weather.
Yes, it is.
What would you say is a good book or film that connects in with Alaska in one way?
I'm currently reading a book called Get Mears. It's a book about Frederick Mears, and it's about the history of the Alaska Railroad. Talks about how they built the Alaska Railroad and all the administrative stuff behind it, and about Frederick Mears in particular and how he led the way building the railroad from 1914 through 1923 was the times he took over. If you're going to go on the railroad, you want to learn about the history of the railroad so you can kind of picture it as you're making your 300-mile journey up to Denali National Park. That's called Get Mears, about Frederick Mears. That's my favorite at the moment.
What would you say is your top food or drink that we really must try when we make it to Alaska?
There is a company that's based out of Talkeetna, and it's called the Denali Brewing Company. And they make some really good seltzers and beers at their brewery in Talkeetna. They just have so many different flavors. They really know how to do seltzers, beer, and cocktails in a can in Alaska. They get it, okay? There's a lot of different breweries and a lot of different varieties, but I kind of partial to the Denali Brewing Company. If you're in Talkeetna, look for them. If you're in a store in Anchorage or somewhere else, look for them on the shelf too. Really good. When it comes to food, you can't go wrong with halibut, fish and chips at a few spots here in Anchorage. They catch it right out in the Cook Inlet, and so it's fresh and really good.
And final question. If somebody wants to take home a piece of Alaska with them, something authentic, something that's real, it's connected to Alaska, maybe something that they'll only find in Alaska, what should they keep an eye out for as a souvenir?
That's a tough one because there's so many different things up here you can get. Some huge souvenir stores in downtown Anchorage. I would have to say a little bit corny, but a moose hat or a bear hat that has the bear's head on there, or some moose antlers. I like kind of funny things like that. I'm also a big fan of novelty Alaska license plates that have different sayings on them, like sled dog or moose or something like that. I have a couple of those myself.
Derek Mooneyham, rail guide with Holland America and Princess Cruise Lines. Thank you so much for unlocking Alaska for us.
You're welcome, Daniel.
Thank you once again to Derek Mooneyham for giving us an alternative perspective into Alaska, taking us away from the coastline and inside this fabulous state. If you're heading out there and looking forward to hearing from you, drop me a message, tell me what you got up to, send me a couple of photos, I'd love to see them. And in the meantime, do double check that you are following the Destination Unlocked podcast, wherever it is you're currently listening. And that way, when you want to come back and find somewhere else to explore around the world, you'll be able to get back nice and easily. Thanks for listening. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.